I would like to call the business meeting of the Portland Board of Public Education to order. It is Tuesday, November 14th, 2023. We are meeting in a hybrid format with some of us here at Casco Bay and some online via Zoom. Take your time, Vice Chair. I'll give more context to this soon, but we have a caucus tonight, so we're going to start with a roll call of who is in the room, and then we'll redo roll call once we have incoming board members with us. So, Deputy Superintendent Townsend, can you please call the roll of the current board?
Yes. Good evening, everybody. We'll start at the top. Member Bilyeu. Vice Chair Bondo.
Présente.
Member Bryden.
Here.
Member Figdor.
Here.
Member Grant.
Here.
Member Opperman.
Here.
Member Russell Better.
Here.
Member Youssef.
Here.
Member Ellis.
Here.
Member Hemond.
Here.
Member McLaughlin. Member Santiago. And Chair Lentz.
Here. And now the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Portland Public Schools recognizes the original inhabitants of the land on which our city and schools stand. The Wolastoqiyik or Maliseet, Micmac, Penobscot, and Passamaquoddy tribes known collectively as the Wabanaki Confederacy or people of the Dawnland. We are honored to have Wabanaki children among our students today, and as a district, we are committed to making the past, present, and future of Wabanaki peoples visible in our schools and our classrooms. And just to remind us of the Portland Public Schools mission, we are responsible for ensuring a challenging, relevant, and joyful education that empowers every learner to make a difference in the world. We build relationships among families, educators, and the community to promote the healthy development and academic achievement of every learner. We're going to start our meeting today with a caucus of the incoming 2023-2024 Board of Public Education. If you're here for public comment or the business meeting, that's going to take place directly after this caucus. So at this point, if you are an outgoing board member, you're going to move away from the chairs and sit in the audience, students and adults, and incoming board members can come on up. And we've got two incoming board members who are joining us on Zoom. We have Fatuma Noor and Yusira Ali. Welcome. We're so glad you're here. And I know that this is your first board meeting. I'm going to be really explicit in my directions about what's going on and what we're doing. So if you have questions at any time, just raise your hand. There's a lot of process and procedure here, but it can be interrupted, okay? Okay, everyone is where they're meant to be. So this purpose, the purpose of this caucus is to discuss the leadership of the incoming board, specifically the chair and vice chair positions, and to come to agreement on the nominations that will be brought forward for official vote on December 5th, which is the inauguration and the first official meeting of the incoming board. All votes taken tonight are considered straw votes, which means that they are non-binding. Official nominations and votes will be taken at the December 5th meeting. So, Deputy Superintendent, will you call the roll again, please, with the incoming board members here?
Member Ali.
Present.
Member Bilyeu.
Yes.
Member Vice Chair Bondo.
Yes.
Member Bryden.
Here.
Member Figdor.
Here.
Member Grant.
Here.
Member Noor.
Here.
Member Opperman.
Here.
Member McDonald.
Here.
And Chair Lentz.
Here. Okay, so now that we've called the roll, the next thing that we do is we have a consideration and an action to enter our caucus. So is there a motion to enter caucus? Thank you, Board Member Opperman. Is there a second? Beautiful. Thank you, Board Member Bryden. And we can do a vote by hand. So all in favor of entering a caucus, please raise your hand. Okay, perfect. So it's unanimous to move into caucus. And we're going to start with nominations for the chair and then move into the vice chair nomination. So I'm going to open the floor for nominations for the 2023-2024 chairperson. Is there a nomination? Thank you, Ben Grant. Go ahead.
Yes, I would like to nominate Sarah Lentz for chairperson for the next school board.
Thank you, Board
Speak to
Member
my motion when the time is appropriate.
Perfect. Thank you. And for this caucus, we don't actually need a second. Are there any other nominations? Okay. So then I'm going to close nominations. I accept the nomination, and I will speak to it in just a moment. But now we have a consideration and action to cease nominations. So is there a motion to cease? Thank you, Board Member Opperman. Is there a second? Board Member Grant? Beautiful. All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Mr. Grant, would you like to speak to your nomination?
Sure, thank you. I'll keep my remarks brief since this is there's only one nomination, but I would like to say a few things. We are experiencing a great deal of change and transition in our world, in our city, in our schools. I think we can see that leadership is always difficult, especially difficult in these times of transition and change. And that good leadership in these times requires a few things: vision, values, a commitment to our community, and a steady hand in making decisions. I think Sarah Lentz has led us with those values in mind and has done a great job for the board and for the district and for the city. And for those reasons, I think she is well positioned to continue that work as we all continue that work of change and transition for our school and for our children. So for that reason, I hope all of my colleagues will support Sarah as our next chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Grant. I'm just going to also speak to the nomination. That I'm just incredibly grateful to have the support of this board. If you choose to vote in my favor, this past year has been incredibly challenging, and each board member in this room has contributed so very deeply. And your trust in my leadership is not something I take lightly. I hope to continue to do my best by all of you and by the entire district if you continue to support my nomination. Would anyone else like to speak to the nomination? Okay, with that, we're going to move into a vote. And as a reminder, this is a non-binding vote to appoint me, Sarah Lentz, this is awkward as well, to the position of board chair for 2023-2024. And per policy BDBR, you have to name the individual that you're voting for with your voice when you're called on. So we're ready for the roll call.
Member Ali.
I'm sorry. Am I?
So if you want to support the nomination that is here, you would say my name.
Okay, Sarah Lentz, I support.
Thank you.
Member Bilyeu.
Sorry, I'm eating right now. Sarah Lentz.
Vice Chair Bondo.
Sarah Lentz.
Member Bryden.
Sarah Lentz.
Member Grant.
Sarah Lentz.
Member Noor.
Sarah Lentz.
Member Opperman.
Sarah Lentz.
Member McDonald.
Sarah Lentz.
And Chair Lentz.
Sarah Lentz. So thank you all so very much. And now we're going to open the floor for nominations for the 2023-2024 Vice Chairperson. Is there a nomination? Yes, Board Member Opperman.
Yes, it's my pleasure to nominate Mickey Bondo as Vice Chair of the Portland Public School Board.
Thank you, Board Member Opperman. We don't need a second for these nominations. Are there any other nominations? Okay, so seeing none, I'm going to now close nominations. Vice Chair Bondo, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I do.
Great. And now we're going to do a consideration and action to cease the nominations. Is there a motion? Thank you, Board Member Bryden. Is there a second? Board Member Grant. All in favor? Beautiful. So that's unanimous. Our nominations have ceased. Board Member Opperman, would you like to speak to your nomination?
Oh, yes, I would. I want to say that even before beginning to work with Mickey on the board, I believed her to be a crucial board member, able to ask probing questions regarding student success academically and socially. And Vice Chair Bondo is a scientist, and as such, has asked for evidence of the effectiveness of Portland Public School policies throughout her term on the board. Moreover, Mickey's leadership in the Portland immigrant community, her experience in the Portland Public Schools as an active parent, and her commitment as a 5-year school board member will be advantageous as the district engages in positive and responsible actions. Vice Chair Bondo will co-lead the Portland Public Schools in establishing policy that will improve student outcomes, support educators, and be fiscally responsible to the community.
Thank you, Board Member Opperman. Would anyone else like to speak to the nomination? Vice Chair Bondo, I would like to thank you for your leadership over the last year. It has been an absolute joy to lead alongside you, and I've learned so much from your leadership. And your commitment to this district and every student in this district is so clear in every interaction I have with you. So thank you for your service, and I look forward to supporting you in this vote.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, with that, we're going to move into a vote. As a reminder, this is a non-binding vote to appoint Board Member Bondo to the position of Vice Chair for 2023-2024. Again, per policy BDBR, please say the name of the individual. So in this case, that would be Mickey Bondo, who you're voting for when you're called on. So please call the roll.
Member Ali,
Mickey Bondo.
Member Bilyeu,
Mickey Bondo.
Member Bondo,
Mickey Bondo.
Member Bryden,
Mickey Bondo.
Member Figdor,
Mickey Bondo.
Member Grant,
Mickey Bondo.
Member Noor,
Mickey Bondo.
Member Opperman,
Mickey Bondo.
Member McDonald,
Mickey Bondo.
and Chair Lentz.
Mickey Bondo. So the vote was unanimous. And that brings us to the end of our voting. So thank you, everyone, for moving through this caucus together. And I look forward to this coming year and working with all of you. Now we need a consideration and action to adjourn the caucus. So is there a motion? Thank you, Board Member Grant. Seconded, Board Member Opperman. All in favor? Beautiful. And thank you so much, new members, for being here. Tonight, we are looking forward to really welcoming you into the board on December 5th, which will have our inauguration and then our actual business meeting immediately following. So thank you again for being here. So incoming board members can now leave and current board members can come back. Thank you. Okay, and now we're going to move into public comment. If you are here to give public comment, please come up to the podium. And I'm going to look at the participants to see if there's any public comment. If there isn't, I'm not going to go over the guidelines. So I'll wait just a couple more beats. I'm not seeing anyone here in this space. I see no Zoom hands at the moment. I'm going to go ahead and close public comment and move on to my remarks. And I would like to start tonight by offering a moment of silence for all of those who lost their lives or were impacted by the mass shootings in Lewiston and Auburn. Thank you. Shortly after the shootings, as part of my day job, I met with many Lewiston and Auburn nonprofits who are responding to the impact of the shootings to hear more about what those nonprofits are experiencing. Many of those nonprofits work with young adults and children in the Lewiston and Auburn communities. They told me stories about young people who, even before the shooting, were already worried about the increased gun violence in their community. Children who, along with their caregivers, were experiencing trauma because the sounds and sights of these shootings reminded them of past violence. Children who are flocking to these nonprofits and after-school programs and to their schools so they can feel safe and belonged. Children whose teachers and schools are doing their very best to support their community through this unbelievable horror, while also trying to take care of themselves. In all the stories I've heard about how the shootings have impacted the people of Lewiston and Auburn, two things have stood out to me. The impact of this violence will be felt for many years to come, and it is our job to continue to support Lewiston and Auburn as they recover. And Lewiston and Auburn have always been strong, and their longtime strength is coming out in full force right now. Lewiston and Auburn, we stand in support with you and all the ways you are holding our children and young adults as we move through this tragedy together. Thank you for everything you're doing for our children. It feels hard to have business as usual because business is not as usual in this country and in the world. So I say that out loud as I move us into our next item of business, which is congratulating all of the people who got voted into office this past first Tuesday of November. We are excited to welcome new board members. We are sad to see outgoing board members. There's new city leadership through our city councilors and mayor, and we look so forward to working and developing relationships with all of them. And also just a reminder that there are district meetings happening throughout the city right now. There's already been 3 of them. Tomorrow night, there's District 4 meeting at Ocean Ave. We've had several board members, the superintendent, and myself present for all of those. And we're happy to hear what the community has to say and answer any questions. So with that, I think I'm going to close my remarks and move to student remarks. Board Member Ellis, are you okay? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, board and members of the public. I'm very excited to give my remarks today and share some updates with you on Casco Bay High School because so many great things have been happening recently. The 9th and 12th graders, as I'm sure you'll be happy to know, came back from Quest safe, happy, and somehow not frozen despite the cold weather. The 10th and 11th graders also got to go on their own outdoor adventures in the following weeks. The 10th graders went to Fort Williams for a field day, and the 11th graders hiked Pleasant Mountain. In more recent news, the quarter ended last Thursday, and every student was doing their best to make sure they were meeting and exceeding standards. As a way to celebrate everyone's hard work, Casco held a fall ball, aka the rescheduled Halloween dance. There was lots of dancing, lots of fall vibes, and a solid amount of money raised for the senior class. Thanks to everyone who came out. The Casco Bay Conundrum was also just announced. This is Casco's annual 24-hour competition in which teams of 4 spend the whole day attempting 24 very strange and surprisingly difficult challenges in order to rack up points and hopefully reign victorious. Each team works separately and can be made up of people from just Portland or from all over the world. The Conundrum launches this Friday at 5 p.m. Good luck to everyone competing. As for academic happenings, the 9th grade just culminated their first expedition, We Are Crew, and are moving on to their expedition that focuses on Wabanaki culture and history. We are on Indigenous land. They kicked off, this was an impressive field day that involved work at Portland Public Library, Portland Museum of Art, and the Fort Loyal Monument downtown. And 10th grade, they're working on creating creative writing in English and studying the Atlantic revolutions in social studies. Soon they will begin Beyond Borders, their main expedition of the year that focuses on immigration and refugee policy. In 11th grade, that's me, we are getting ready to kick off our first and perhaps biggest expedition of the year, public policy. Students will begin researching a policy of their choosing that involves climate change and then putting together complex presentations that they will share with a panel of experts. In preparation for the hard work ahead, we have been building background knowledge about climate policy for the past couple of weeks in social studies. Seniors have been putting in hard work in terms of preparing for life after high school. There has been tons of essay writing, application writing, and college touring. Congrats to the students who have submitted early decision or early action applications, and good luck to everyone getting ready to apply. Along with this, seniors have also been working on their senior expeditions. Everyone has chosen their own topic to do in-depth research on. Feel free to take a look at our senior expedition board right by the entrance. It showcases everyone's chosen topics. Looking forward, the March to the Post Office will hopefully be happening December, and winter intensives, which there are an array to choose from, will be happening in January. Lastly, before I close my remarks, as I'm sure all of you already know, this will be the final set of remarks I will be giving to you, seeing as Casco has elected someone else, someone far cooler and smarter, to say the least, to be the student rep for this upcoming term. I'm sure he's going to do all sorts of amazing things on the board, but it does make me incredibly sad to no longer have this as a part of my life. I hope you all know how grateful I am for this past year. This time on the board has really helped me cultivate my passion for education and all that's involved with it. Know that you have all helped inspire a future educator. That's all for me. Thank you.
Board Member Ellis, we are going to miss you. We welcome you to 4-hour meetings at any point, though. So come on back. But thank you for all of the service that you have given us. And just a quick correction to my earlier statement: District 4 meeting is Thursday, not tomorrow. So I apologize for saying the wrong day. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the superintendent.
Happens to me every time where when the slides go up, I then lose my screen. So sorry about that. Good evening, everyone. It is good to be with you here tonight. Similar to Board Chair Lentz, I do want to start with a couple of comments on Lewiston. It seems like only yesterday and at the same time months ago that the shooting in Lewiston occurred. As Board Chair Lentz shared, the shootings and devastation remind us all of how precious life is and how much we need to make sure that we are protecting and looking out for everybody in this work. The Portland Public Schools lost a community member in this tragedy. I would like to express my deep sympathy to the family, friends, and colleagues of Joshua Seal, a member of Maine's deaf community, a former educational technician at East End Community School, and also a Portland Public School parent. Joshua, who died in the October 25th shootings, was a much-loved member of the PPS family. As a district, this tragedy is something that we never want to face this close to our doorstep. As we faced it, I'm extremely appreciative of the support that we received from both families and staff. Through the leadership of Deputy Superintendent Townsend, members of the central office team, school leaders, and staff, we were able to have students return back to school on that following Monday with additional support and counseling there to provide support. And so unbelievably appreciative for everybody who, as also worrying about their own safety, the safety of their family, we're also jumping in to make sure that we were prepared and ready for students. At the same time, I also want to thank our partners at the city throughout this evolving situation. We were, as a district, in close contact with City Manager West and Chief Du Bois, who were both supportive and ensured that we acted as a collective in an aligned and supportive manner. And so very appreciative for their partnership in this work. As Chair Lentz said, it's hard to both recognize the devastation in Lewiston and continue with business as usual. And yet, that is the challenge that we face. And so I'm going to push on and share updates on a handful of topics. First, tonight I'm excited to welcome new board members and celebrate some successes on the field. I will then provide a short update on our strategic plan and our plans for any snow days, which seems timely considering the snowfall last week and the amount of time my kids talked about potential snowfall this morning. We will then have Executive Director of Finance, Di Bartolomeo, share an update on progress in our finance department, and Deputy Superintendent Townsend will review our school year 22 and 23 school climate data. We're very fortunate in Portland Public Schools to have many dedicated members that spend countless time on this board in what is a way that may seem glamorous and fun and great, and truthfully is pretty thankless and tiresome and hard. And so I'm unbelievably appreciative for the board members that I've had the opportunity to work with in my first 4 months. And I also look forward to welcoming our new members that are stepping onto the team in that December meeting. So thank you to those who are leaving us. We have one more meeting with you, so don't try to get out too soon. And also welcome aboard to those who are coming. I often sit up here to highlight the successes of our teachers and students in the classroom. Tonight, I also want to highlight some successes on the field. I can't do all of them, but I'm going to hit a couple of the high notes. This fall, I've had the opportunity to see many sporting events, and these are ones that are of particular success. So first, I want to recognize Portland High School's boys cross country team that won their first state title in 45 years. Second, and up on the screen now, Samantha Moore, a junior at Portland High School, who won the individual state championship. Deering High School boys soccer team, who had a fantastic game on Saturday and came up just short, and so finished in second place in the state final. And then Portland High School's football team, which is playing now, not literally now, but very soon in the state final. And so just really exciting that as a community, we continue to excel both in the classroom, in extracurriculars, and on the field. I feel like it's not superintendent comments if we don't talk about listen and learn or the strategic plan. And so we're going to do it again, but mostly just to give a quick update on the where we're at. And so just as a reminder, for folks who are new to this conversation, the first 4 months of this school year were really spent in a listen and learn, where as a district, as a collective, we got a lot of feedback from members of our community, looking at our data, doing classroom observations, and developed an organizational diagnostic that we talked about on October 3rd. That organizational diagnostic has served as the base for where we're at now, which is in our strategic planning process that will go on from now until about the end of February. Continuing probably a little into March. That will be us renewing our goals and priorities and initiatives for the upcoming 5 years. And then we will launch into the budget process that will align with that. This work is not done in isolation, but is done instead with a strong team of community partners and members of our steering committee. And so if you want to go to the next slide. I'm not going to read the names. We've seen these names before, but I thought it was really important to just acknowledge that this is not something that's happening in isolation, but is really happening through the leadership of this cross-section of our community. This community group, next slide, will meet in the next 4 months, 4 additional times. On the left, you can see the topics that they will be digging in on. So the first meeting that happened on November 1st really focused on aspirations. The conversation was, where do we want Portland Public Schools as a community to be in 5 years? And then over the next 3 or 4 months, we get into the meat of how do we make that happen? Well, this community group is leading this work. There are additional opportunities for community feedback in this process. January 8th, the week of January 8th, we will be running focus groups and have opportunities to provide feedback on a draft of the strategic plan, and again on February 12th. And so we have an iterative process that is happening here that will allow feedback in both those times. For the board, if you look at both updates on the strategic plan as well as our monitoring process that we kick off at the next meeting, we will provide updates on the strategic plan in more depth on the December 19th, February 6th, and April 2nd meeting. And of course, if there are times in between where there are questions or information, happy to engage in that. We also have 2 members of our board who serve on that steering committee that can also help provide information and questions. Last, I want to give an update on everybody's favorite topic, which is snow days. In our snow day process, we wanted to prioritize instruction for students and timely communication for staff and families. In our process, we received feedback from board members, staff, and leaders. We heard three sort of trends that I would say. The first is that people want predictability. They want to know what to expect and what's coming up. The second is that there are challenges with virtual learning, especially with our younger students. And third, there is nothing, and we all know this, there's nothing that replaces face-to-face instruction with our staff for our students. We landed in a spot that tried to balance these three items. And we know that not everybody will be happy, but we believe that this maximizes learning for our students. Similar to past, it actually mirrors in many ways similar to past processes. But this year, if we have snow days, we will take 3 traditional snow days. On these days, the proposal is that there will be no work, no school district food, but we will work with our partners to make sure that members of our community are fed and have access to food. It has to do with billing and reimbursement. And so we will make sure that there is food there. And if we take all 3 of these days, the last day for students would move to June 17th and for staff, June 18th. If we do have more than 3 snow days, we are planning for some virtual instruction. Our K-5 students would move to packets that would be provided, and we're working to figure out if there's a way to provide still some small group or individual learning, knowing that that's very difficult. Our 6th through 12th grade students will hold virtual instruction. They will use devices that are provided by the school, and we have some support that is available around internet connectivity to support that. And then third, on those days, if we do move to virtual instruction after 3 snow days, school district food would be available, and our plan details how folks would pick up food. I'm going to pause there to see if there are any questions around my pieces before I invite up our executive director.
Board Member Figdor?
Can you explain how the packets will be distributed, assuming that we don't always have prior knowledge of big snow events? I mean, sometimes we certainly can anticipate them, but other times not.
Yeah, I mean, we'll err on the side if after the 3 snow days, and we're working to kind of update and refresh some of the tools that we had available during remote learning. We did some central production of packets, and so having those available in case, right, we have to have a snow day. So we will be proactive to make sure things go home. And if students just come back the next day with them and we don't have school, then that's fine. But we will err on the side of caution so that we're prepared.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Board Member
I just
Potter.
want to emphasize what Member Victor just mentioned about, can you just give a little more details about the process of those package after the 3 days? Just a little bit, just to understand as the way the pipeline will work after those 3 days, if you can, please.
So let me know if this doesn't answer your question entirely, but, we will have for each of the elementary and including pre-K, some set of hard copy work that students will carry home. And so it'll be distributed if we are anticipating the possibility of a closure, right? Obviously we monitor, we work with the city in terms of the city emergency management, get regular weather updates, all those kinds of things. So if we think there's a possibility of a snow day or inclement weather day, then we will send those home. So those will have been produced and be prepared ahead of time so that students can carry them home. If we do have a snow day, they'll complete them to the best of their ability, bring them back for class the next day that school resumes. If we do end up having school, then they'll just bring them back and teachers will collect them so that they're available in case of another inclement weather day. Is it?
Can I just add a little bit of color on this? So I don't know exactly how this will mirror in Portland Public Schools, but in my past district, my personal students had a homework folder, right? That had homework in it that they would take to and from school and that would be available. And so what I picture in this case is that we will produce some work that students will have to do at home that would be in that homework folder. So it's not created day of, right? Where you would anticipate like, oh, tomorrow's a snow day. Let's have all the teachers working to create lessons that they can do tomorrow. No, it's something that can be almost plugged in at any point. They would take the folder home. If they do the work, because it's a snow day, they bring it back the next day. Teachers look at it, review, use it to inform instruction. If it's the case that they don't use it, they bring it back. Teacher has it. Next time, they're ready to give it out again.
Perfect. Thank you for the clarification. Thank you, both of you. Thank you.
Yeah, Board Member Figler?
I guess I just have one follow-up question, which is, do we think there are equity implications of this proposal, given that there are going to be some students who have less access to parents helping them, less structure, less scaffolding, etc. And so just wanted to see what we've done to think through those implications. Less or no technology, etc.
Yeah, I do anticipate that there will be some equity challenges to that. And this was sort of how we tried to balance it, the best case, which is the original proposal that we had people provide feedback on was actually doing virtual starting at the beginning. And part of what we heard in feedback there was that's going to be really challenging. And so what we're weighing here is more the challenge of what does instruction look like on the 20th, 21st, 22nd, and diminishing returns. And so trying to find like that landing spot. I don't think there's a perfect, right? In our ideal world, everybody would have access to a device and internet and be able to, fully engage, or we'd have no snow days, right? And this is sort of like the best attempt. But I think that we can also work with our staff to just be aware of who may need additional support and see if we can target some Reach My Teach communication, some other supports to be of help.
Any other questions on the snow day? Just double check. Okay. All right. I think we can move on to the next one.
So I'm excited to welcome up Executive Director Helene D. Bartolomeo. I feel like I've been hyping her for a long time. And, she had her first committee meeting yesterday with finance and is ready to dig in and share an update on what she's learned. As context, Helene has been with the district supporting 2 days a week, about mid-August, and her first full week was October 2nd. And so what you're about to sort of go through and have her walk you through is her both lessons learned as well as an update and our direction forward after a month. And I say that all with the caveat that things will change, things will adjust as we continue to peel back the onion and understand it more deeply. But I'm excited to have you here, Helene, and to have you share what you've learned.
Thank you, Superintendent Scallon, and good evening, board members. So again, we're just going to go kind of through the things we've learned, what's happening with the audit, and Erin. And then we'll go into detail in regards to like from the audit, what we learned, then how we're building the team in essence of why we're from what we're expecting to see from the audit, and also to speak a little bit about how the ADP transitioning is going. And then I have some information about in regards to the current budget year, give you some numbers. We did speak a little bit more in depth at the Finance Committee yesterday in regards to the FY24 budget, but I just want to give you some highlights to what that looks like, and then what the budget process looks like for FY25. So again, the audit, what we're learning is, as we're going into the audit, we have the auditors coming, the city auditors coming the week of December 4th for their on-site audit work. And as we prepared for that, we had Barry Dunn retained to help us with getting us there. As you know, our finance department was very short-staffed, and a lot of our staff is very unfamiliar with what that process looks like. So they've been very very informative in helping us get to that finish line to get that city audit prepared. So currently, still pending right now with the auditors is we are working on finalizing some cash reconciliations. We're also looking at some HR did a audit for us internally. And what we're just trying to do is determine whether or not if any of the changes that the HR department determined needed to be done affects the FY23 year. So we're looking at those items just to make sure there's not an impact that we need to make any adjustments for. The other items that Barry Dunn is also assisting us with is our GASB 80, what's called a GASB 87 requirement of reporting, and it has to do with software and leases. Is something that last year the city did early implementation on, and we did not get involved with that process. So we are working towards making sure that we are prepared this time of the year. This time for the fiscal year end to be prepared for that GASB reporting. Some other items that are still the last couple of items that we're still on an ongoing basis currently. Barry Dunn actually had a dedicated auditor, like literally sitting in our office, in the finance office, and working with our grant accountant, who was, when I started, a month new. And he's been working with her at the same time as he was helping us get to year end, but also showing her how we can start invoicing so that we can get our reimbursements from the state. We're a little behind on our reimbursements, but with their help, we're getting ourselves back on track. And so hopefully by within, I would say, the next 3 months, we should start getting caught up to where we should be. But what Barry Dunn is right now focusing on is just assisting us with getting to the end of the year. And then the last piece that Barry Dunn is also assisting with us on is the fixed asset component. So again, it's a piece where we give the information to the city in regards to what those assets are. And what we're doing is we're working with the operations department, and which is food service, facilities and maintenance, as well as the IT department. And did I get them all? And transportation. Thank you, Oberman. And we're looking at those and making sure that we're current on all of our new and disposed assets, so that when we report it to the city, we're all on the same page with what that looks like. So again, the auditors for the city will be here the week of the 4th, and we are working towards having everything prepared for that. There will be items that won't be complete, but again, after speaking to the city, because the auditors are coming so late in the year to audit, not just only us, but the city as well. The anticipation is that we really probably won't have something available for financial reporting until January timeframe, is what I'm told by the city. So again, the audit is a look back, right? So we're looking at FY23. And so some of the things that I've kind of prepared Ryan for, and I want to prepare the board for, is from what I saw and what I'm been working with the auditors on, what the expectation is that we're going to see moving into this audit, and what we should anticipate what some of these findings are going to look like, just from a perspective of being in this situation before. One of the big ones is going to be the segregation of duties. As you know, because we were shrunk down so small, we will be most likely have findings on internal control issues, being that we don't have enough employees to segregate the duties that we have for each of the pieces of responsibilities. There's also going to be some issues in regards to some finding about the integrity of our financials. That's a little bit on the high end. I'm not sure if their auditors are going to be that deep into it, but I just want you to be prepared for that, only because of what I saw as what we were dealing with as far as payroll issue concerns that we're seeing in the system. A lot of the issues are integrated in the system itself, so it caused a lot of issues internally. And so there may be an instance where we'll see a finding in regards to the integrity of our financials, since payroll and benefits is such a large portion of our financials. Also, the lack of timing of getting reconciliations done. That's a huge issue with auditors when it comes to when they're looking at our processes. Everything needs to be done in a more timely fashion because it allows for things to be caught early on. And obviously, we did not do many of those things because, again, the lack of personnel within the department to manage all of that. And the last piece is lack of written procedures. One of the first things I realized coming into this position is that nobody has written documentations how to do their job. So it's kind of like a fly or flight, which is, again, a reason why we have Barry Dunn helping us moving forward. So a lot of this will be rectified through corrective action. Next slide. So as we're moving forward and looking at how we're building the team and looking at the corrective actions we're going to need to be taking place, we're using that as an opportunity to say, what are the components that we need within the finance department in order to start working towards these findings, the findings that we've had in the past. And a lot of it has to do ensuring, separation of duty, redundancy, written documentation. So in the next slide, you'll start seeing that, again, the construction of the finance department that I'm trying to put together here has to do with what we need in our department. So far to date, we've hired a payroll manager, and I think she's regretting now. I'm just kidding. She's great. She's helping me also dive in deeper. I've, as I came on, there was I was kind of scattered in many directions. So she's been able to really hone in for me and start digging really deep into what it is that we're missing the mark on. And not only that, I told her number one goal was to be my expert in ADP for us. So I also just recently hired a purchasing manager. And she also is another employee that has started with us. She's been diving in on the purchasing side, assisting with that, as well as assisting and being willing to cross-train on some position control management. Because as of right now, I kind of have an opening in that area where I need some help with that coverage. We're also, the payroll manager and myself are working on doing an interviews for a second payroll specialist that will also assist with the whole segregation of duties. And my plan moving forward would be to hire an accounting manager that would eventually take over position control, but then I would also have the purchasing manager to be my backup as position control. And then that position would also manage the day-to-day operations so that I can work closer with Ryan on strategic planning, the FY25 budget, things to that matter. The other piece that I wanted to hire is what we call a finance specialist. And this person would also be someone that we would use for redundancy when it comes to managing, whether they learn a little bit of how to enter payroll data in the system or cover the AP specialist, because currently we only have one. So, if she wanted to go on vacation or she was out sick, we can continue business without a hiccup in the process, as well as manage anything else and be a conduit for the finance department. Because that was another piece, is we get so inundated with our day-to-day that we forget that we also have to take care of the people outside of our department. And so that position would also cover that, making sure that there's always this communication. Like right now, one of the things that I realize is that sometimes our customer service is not 100%. The one thing employees want to hear is a voice on the other side saying, "I hear your problem. I'm going to research it for you." And I'm not going to say we're the best at it, but we're trying to get there, and that position would help us get there as well. So currently, right now in the finance department, we have some contracted employees that are working with us. We have 3 contracted employees that work and currently assist to help the finance department on a day-to-day basis. We have Barry Dunn that's helping us with the audit. And then we have a 4th contractor right now that's the project manager for the ADP project that she's managing for us. So the idea is, so far, just recently ended the first contract, which was was one of the contracted employees that was helping with the day-to-day operation. Now that I have a payroll manager and a purchasing manager in working with us and in the school district, I realized that we could start kind of ticking down some of these contracts. So that first one ended on November 9th. We are expecting that the second one to end at the end of December. And then we have 2 contractors that once the handoff for the ADP program would happen, one was working with day-to-day, the other one being the project manager. Those 2 positions would pretty much end as soon as they do a handoff of the ADP program to HR and finance. And then the last piece is the Barry Dunn. And, we're right now working with Barry Dunn to help us finalize the audit. So I anticipate them being with us a little bit longer past the audit because of so much information that they're gathering for us and getting us ready for or finalizing for the audit. So in regards to the ADP piece on moving forward, we're looking at how this is going to change the way we work. It's going to be very different for many people. There's going to be a lot less paper. I could promise you that. And there's going to be a lot of accountability in there. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for eyes to be on what's going on in the system from perspective. I've looked in there. It's very easy on the eyes compared to what the system we're using now is very user friendly. I was able today to pull a report very quickly for one of the departments to kind of give them a roll call of the employees that are listed under their department so they can have an idea of what we're showing in that system. And so also ADP is going to allow us to maintain that separation of duties between what is done between HR and payroll. And so that's going to be a big piece of what we're looking at that we're going to see that we had as a finding. This is also giving us an opportunity for all of us, whether management or practitioners, to be able to create some procedures and start creating not a new wheel, but a better wheel. And it's allowing us, especially for Barrett and I, we've been like best buds collaborating a lot. And it's really exciting for all of us. For some of us, it's a little new. I mean, they're asking us many questions, and right, Barrett, that we're like, we don't know. That's a good question, but let's figure it out. And so it's created a great opportunity for us to collaborate as through departments. So just to give you a quick timeline, the first registration is going to begin in December. That's going to be December 11th. The first punch is going to start Sunday the 24th is just the beginning of that biweekly pay week. So that's why you see Sunday. No, I don't anticipate anybody to actually punch in on the 24th, but that's when we start. That's the time frame that it's a Sunday through Saturday. And then the first paycheck comes out of ADP on January 12th. So far we've given out some information to our leadership team on November 6th. We have the communications department who's been amazing and patient with us. And thank you, Grace, and your team. They've been working really, really hard. they're putting together some great FAQs, a new web link with lots of information on it, and they're poking us constantly for more information. So the more information, the better, that we can really, really hone in and get that information out to every employee. So we're working on creating a list of videos. ADP has a encyclopedia of video trainings on every single process that you can do. So whether it's a video or just, paper, or not paper, but electronic pictures of like step-by-step instructions on everything. So we're working on getting that all together so we can start training the different users, which are our end users, our managers, and then our practitioners, which are going to come out of payroll and HR and finance. So yes, so the trainings will start with the managers on the week of November 20th. And then we're going to start showing some training videos to our employees the week before they actually start training. And we're doing it this way because we're trying to make sure that they are well informed and have enough time to get registered and make sure they have people, like the school district's still open and we're not like closed for the winter break yet, so that we can make sure by the time the first punch is ready that they had enough time to get into the system. And if they don't, we're making sure that there's time built in so that we can ensure that they have someone to go to at their site's location for assistance on how they get registered. And the registration is going to be every single one of you, all too, will get that information as well, how to get into it, because it will allow you to review your information from your paychecks, your W-2s, and not the 2023 W-2s, but moving forward W-2s, be able to change your address, your banking information. So it's really important for every single person that gets a employee check from the school district to register on ADP. And the last piece of the training is that we're going to be working with each school site. We're going to ask each school site to select 2 ambassadors so that we can kind of train them to help anybody who needs assistance at their location. So if no one at the central office has the ability to provide that assistance, then at least they know that there's a couple of people at their sites, each site, to also help with some general questions about registering. So the time entry is going to be done in 3 different ways. There's going to be time clocks. We have about 2 clocks at each site location that we're planning on implementing. We just got the clocks in today, and we're working with the IT department on how those are going to be configured. We also are going to have an online portal that you'll be able to go into. And the last piece is we're going to have the ADP app available. Now, the only thing with the ADP is that the app is going to be available, and you're going to see an ability to download the app when you actually register. The only caveat to the app is because of the constraints right now, the IT is going to be in with the Wi-Fi time clocks and with the online portal. We were trying to make sure that we didn't over bog them down with too much tech assistance. So we are moving forward with the app, but we're just making sure that people are aware that there won't be anyone that they could possibly use if they have technical issues with the app. But I downloaded it. It's really pretty simple. It looks just like your desktop, so it shouldn't be that difficult. And then the other piece to the ADP is you're going to be able to do benefits onboarding. And then there's going to be a third final piece of for the finance department, which is called ResNav. And that's just a position control piece that was purchased for us to work with for position control and budget management of employees or staff. So now that we kind of explain all the things that we're going to be looking to work in a better place, there are still some outstanding items that we engaged Barry Dunn for. And those three things are the main PERS, the vacation and sick accruals, and then the voluntary retirement. These items were, as you know, items that were progressing through time. And because it's such a huge undertaking, I can't have my staff help me move forward at the same time as trying to ensure that we're doing all of these items well. So we did engage Barry Dunn to assist us with that, since they had the capability on their end to assist, and they have agreed to assist us with these items. And then one of the other pieces that we are also doing is, as we move forward, we had implemented a ticket system so that employees had an opportunity to advise us if there were issues with their payroll. So one of the things that was happening is we were getting inundated with emails and phone calls, and sometimes we were able to call back, and sometimes those emails got missed or they went to the wrong people. So this ticket system was created with our IT director. He put it together for us, and what we have done is we've broken out the ticket system in basically 3 categories. If you have an issue with benefits, if you have an issue with HR issues, or if you have a payroll issue, and that they have the ability, employees have the ability to go log on and explain what their issue is. And what we've been doing is then turning around. Now that I have a payroll manager, the payroll manager gets the initial ticket. She assigns it, and then someone reaches out within 24 to 48 hours of the ticket. Again, we don't have the best customer service, but we are, trying to aim for that 24 to 48 hours. We were not very good at it at the very beginning, but we're really striving now with it, as well as because we're finding what the issues are. And I think every payroll, it seems like they're just a little bit less tickets from the previous payroll. So, and then what we have is the HR, the finance staff is going out and trying to resolve the issue within 21 days per the MOU. If that ticket does not get resolved within the 21 days, then the executive director of people and equity and myself, we get together and we review what those tickets look like. And then we try to determine maybe the reason why that ticket didn't get resolved or not. And then we put together, this last time we put together some information about those tickets, and we met with our union leaders and discussed some of those items. We just had our first meeting. There were 8 tickets that were past the 21 days when we met with them. And then, as you can see, with that first meeting, we still had 2 remaining open. But through discussion, like anything else, when you speak to somebody and you start explaining what's going on and you have a great face-to-face discussion, you're able to start really understanding where the hiccups may be. And it's a learning process for all of us, but moving forward, we do have a standing meeting every Thursday with union reps to review anything that's over 21 days. So our goal is really not to have that meeting, but we have it on our schedule. So with that said, I'm going to take a slight pause and give you all an opportunity to absorb what I just told you and ask me some questions.
What questions? Board Member Bryden.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much. Tons of great information, and I appreciate all the hard work that went into preparing all of this for us. Could you just tell us, maybe it's just me, but anybody else who might be wondering, what is position control?
So position control is a way that employees can't be hired unless it was budgeted for. So if a school was assigned 10 teachers, it prevents them from being able to hire 11 teachers.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions, Board Member Grant?
Thank you very much for all this. Quick question. How many tickets are we sort of averaging now per payroll run, just in total? I understand the 8 you had to discuss, but just what's the volume these days?
The last time I looked, we had 82 tickets. Yeah. So, and I spoke to Ryan and explained to him that, you know, in every situation, you're always going to have some level of margin of error. You can't ever have a payroll that's going to be 100% perfect. So there's so much human touch through the process.
0 is not the answer I was expecting.
Good. Ryan,
He
what?
delivered.
Vice Chair Bondo.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and well concise. Thank you. So I have 2 questions. One on the fixed assets, the fixed asset on the one on the slide.
Yes.
So I saw that now we have an operational team who has to review those fixed assets. And I look at on the line there is that something was done previously without the district staff. So I just want to understand, is the process the way it should be, or it was done differently, or if now that review is a combination of both teams?
So what happened is, because I think of the so much changeover at the district level, the city had some went about getting the asset information in a different way previously. So with Barry Dunn being here and being able to really hone in on the items we need to be looking at in order to be audit ready, they asked me, like, who is the best team that we should use in order to review these assets for us? And I told her that it would be Miss Warren in regards to the fact that she manages departments that hold a lot of the higher value assets, because we're looking at assets that have a value of over $20,000. So it would be that the food service and the transportation and the IT department that would be the ones purchasing those type of items.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you. And the last one, I see we have some reduction of contractors. I mean, so are we see any cost saving when we ending the services?
Absolutely. And that's the goal, is to ensure that we don't continue to rely on the contracted services and that we're able to run on our own. Because eventually too, as you see that I put is, you know, we want to invest in people who want to be here. And when we hire contractors, you know, we're training these individuals to do a job for us, but then they leave when the job's done. So I'm really trying to transition that out and have a return on investment by hiring employees that will stay and really understand the processes and make sure that it gets done all the way to the end.
Exactly. So maybe my sub question is, roughly, do you know exactly how much we can have as a saving? On the top of your head, or maybe just have a follow-up?
On the top of my head, but if it's something I can gather and get you that information.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And I just want to recognize the last one. It was a question, but I already see I saw the answer. I really recognize those are two ambassadors from each sides of the school, because it's really important. Then we have the communication ongoing on process anytime, anywhere, when the staff and employees are really needed. So we just need to make sure that they're also bilingual to have the balance on equity. So we have a good orientation and good explanation. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And just to follow up on that, making sure that those ambassadors are available in nighttime hours for custodians that work at night. I've talked to several custodians that payroll has always been something they've felt under-supported by. So if we can just take that into consideration,
absolutely,
that would be awesome. And for the July 12th, the first paycheck, like, what is the run up to that? Like, are there practice go buttons, or like how do we make sure that first paycheck is right?
So right now what we're doing what's called parallel testing. So we have all of our data in the ADP, all of our employees, and we're also trying to make sure that at some point we're dual entering anything moving forward, that they're the same in both systems. And then what we're doing is, once we run a payroll in our live system, then we have that same payroll processed in the ADP system to see what the results end up looking like.
Awesome. So that will happen multiple times before we get
Yes,
to the
we have
12th.
already done it once and that came out well.
Okay.
But it also helps enlighten us to determine what are the things that are missing from those employees' setups that we had in one system that we haven't applied in the ADP system to ensure that they're. So yeah, it allows us to do a comparison to see what we're missing.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for that. And just thank you in general. I know that you are working literally around the clock to try to get your head around this as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
I know the timeline that we have you on right now is impossible. And so I just really appreciate everything that you're putting into the job, but then also like you're not taking any shortcuts, like you are really digging deep and finding the bottom of every issue. And I just want to say out loud that like we want to hear the bottom of every issue so that we know that we're building back correctly. And I'm sure Board Member Bryden also shares this sentiment, but I'm just really excited that we're hearing the words redundancy, we're hearing cross-training, we're hearing operationalizing and just writing things down, because I just think that's the foundation that we need to move forward. So thank you for all the work that you're doing, and your team too, because I know they're doing the same thing.
No, and I thank you all, because I know it's not easy to have trust in someone to make sure that the right thing gets done. So I do appreciate that you have that faith in me that we'll get there.
Board Member Figdor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I want to echo the Chair's thanks and gratitude. My one quick question is, as we're finishing making the corrective actions, such as through Barry Dunn, are we having to make those corrections in both systems, both our existing Munis system and ADP?
No, we're looking at just using the current system. We're down to, at this point, 2 more payrolls. So at this point, we're just trying to ensure that we're putting all the right information in there and ensure we're paying employees correctly and putting more time and effort into the ADP system, because that's going to be the final product that we're going to be used and audited from. So that's because what's in Munis is what's there already. But moving forward, this will give us now the information so that when the auditors come at the end for FY24, they're going to see the procedures and practices that we're currently working on in the ADP system.
So it would just be if there's some kind of systemic fix that we needed to make that would have to be made to the ADP system as well, but maybe we're past that.
Yeah, we're past that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. And that's great to hear.
Yeah.
Board Member Youssef.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for the great information. So the segregation of duties, are you talking about the whole department or specific areas, and how ADP will help us?
So it's just specific procedures. So currently there were, like, for instance, we would have payroll processing information that should be processed through another department. So we're just using ADP. We'll be able to make sure that those responsibilities are managed separately, and that internally the system will allow certain positions to be able to manage certain things.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions?
Nyla.
Oh, Nylet. Board Member Bilio.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this presentation. I'm really seeing some things that I've been wanting to see as a process. So I'm grateful for that. I'm wondering if you can tell me when you think we'll have some consistency in payroll, like when folks are able to at least, have that consistency of knowing like when they're going to get their paycheck every month, if that makes sense.
Well, currently that's what's happening in the system where we are in now. What ADP is going to allow us to do is also allow the employee to make changes, if there's some last minute changes that might also affect. So they'll be able to, that's the part where I was saying there's going to be more accountability, because I think that what's happening now, it's really difficult for the managers to be able to see what's going on, because you have pieces that are coming in through one software program and we're just electronically bringing it into our payroll system. And then some items are being brought in through a piece of paper or an Excel spreadsheet. All that is going away. Everyone's going to be clocking in and out or submitting their time off in one system, and it's all happening in one place where managers can see everything on one dashboard. In essence, they'll be able to see everything that's going on with their employees. They'll be able to see whether or not the employee forgot to clock in or out, or if they forgot to put in their vacation time. All of that, it's happening in one seamless place. And I think that's part of what we were missing all of this time. We were constantly getting information from all sorts of directions. And unless you were somebody who's been there for 20 years, you wouldn't realize that you were still missing this spreadsheet, or we missed the time clocks in for this employee. And so we were expecting a piece of paper to come in through the payroll email. So this is an all-inclusive one place where all of that's happening. So it's going to be pretty seamless as far as the ability for managers to understand what's going on with their employees.
Thank you. And then can you tell me more about how accessible ADP is going to be after the implementation?
Like as far as available, you can log in from anywhere.
No, sorry, I meant like the actual customer service of the actual company, because I was like you said that we're relying a lot on contracts, and if there's an issue that happens on the app and the app is not working, like what is the access to ADP for them to help us work on that? Or do we have our own tech people that are going to be able to fix the app when it's down or when it's not responsible?
The app situation is most likely going to be a situation where we would contact ADP. The piece that I was suggesting is that because we have a new system coming in place where employees are looking at a new area to provide the information to the payroll department to get paid for, is going to be very different from them. That was where I was saying that we were trying to limit the different areas that they were going to use in order to get that timing in to the system, just so that we weren't bogging down our own staff, knowing that most likely we're going to get a lot of phone calls from employees that might have missed punching in or out, and how do I get that done and whatnot. So we're just making sure that we're not internally overextending ourselves into too many areas of possibility of where employees might need assistance. And I'm not sure if that answered your question, but I hope it did.
Yes and no. I guess I'm wondering what happens if the app is not So like if the app breaks down and, we're relying on the app for a lot of these processes, do we have a department that's going to fix the app, or are we then, reliant on ADP as a company to then have to come in and help us resolve that issue? And then what would that process also look like? Putting more money into ADP, or are they giving us this like resource as an ongoing partnership?
Well, one of the things that we are doing is we're giving the employee the ability to clock in 3 different ways. It's going to be a physical time clock at each of the locations. It's going to be on a computer. They can log in from a computer anywhere or using the app. So there will always be a secondary source. And if they miss that opportunity to log in, say internet's down, for instance, we even actually purchased backup batteries and the Wi-Fi capability so that if there is a power outage, employees will still have the ability to clock in and out. So we're making sure that there is going to be a capacity to enter time. And if they do miss that, then there will always be the ability for the staff at each of the locations to manually enter the time for the employee. So there's never going to be a missed opportunity there.
Okay, thank you. And maybe this question is more for Ryan. I just need to understand more about like the technical aspect. Like we don't have that much tech support from what I understand. So what do we do if, I'm not talking about like if folks can't get in, like, you know, for 2 days, what if the whole app is down and we need like actual resources to fix it up again? And so what happens is, I know Aaron, I think Aaron is nodding his head that we have like continuous resource. What would that look like?
Yeah, if I can take your question sort of at 3 levels and hoping one of them sort of is the information you're seeking. So first, the contracted support that we have currently is really about the transition from Munis to ADP. There's a ton of work that goes from moving the data from Munis, making sure it's correct and accurate, and then loading it into ADP, and also making sure that the business rules that ADP uses are correct. So for example, if you're a teacher, how many days of sick time do you get in ADP? Those are the business rules. So our contractors are really there to help us project manage and get the data over there. The ongoing, ADP is a huge company. And so I don't think there's any worry about continuing operations of ADP and the software standing up. There's 3 different ways that we are providing for employees to log their time, right? So one of them is a physical time clock. We're going to talk more about that in a second. The second is the website. And the third is an app. And that's all 3 of those. There's redundancy there. So if it happens to be a day where the internet is down or there's a power outage, first off, we got backup generators or backup batteries on these items so that it stores the information. It's also the case that, heaven forbid, it all goes down for a day. There is the ability for the supervisor to go in and just manually enter it. And so that it's approved. That same piece will happen if one of our employees on the first day, right, when they get back from winter break, just forgets. This is not meant to be a got you. It's not meant to be a harm. It's actually meant to have all of your information in one spot so that no longer do we have an issue where you look at your number of sick days and they don't match up with what you think they should be. And so there is the ability for folks to do that. And so the third piece is the piece around the ADP app, right? Is we're trying to provide as many different ways for folks to do it. It's often the case that when we get tech questions for help, they're questions that aren't actually the right questions to ask us. We're not the app designer, and we can't provide capacity around that piece. What we can do is have the ambassadors that we're training at each site be able to say like, oh, I'm comfortable with the app. I use it all the time. Let me show you. And staff centrally will use the app and say like, oh, I can show you. And so what we mean by it is simply, if you are completely new to it and struggling to download it, that's something that we don't necessarily have the technical ability to do. But in terms of the ongoing support of having ADP stand up and work, I don't think that is an ongoing worry, even if there was a small moment like when your Gmail goes down where it's inaccessible. We anticipate that ADP may have something like that and it'll be recoverable. And so I don't think we have redundancy to the level of where we're keeping separate records because the actual risk is relatively small to that. If I can clean up just one additional piece just around, we use the term clocking in, clocking out, punching, probably a little bit like to mean a lot of things. And so just want to just clear up, because I know this has been a topic of conversation in the district for a couple of weeks. For our salaried exempt employees, what they will do is they will go into the ADP, whether website or app, and enter when they have a sick day or when they have a vacation day. They'll just go in, plug it in the same way that they currently do in Frontline. And that is to record that they were out. And at the end of the pay period, their supervisor, when they approve payroll for the whole school building or the department, will make note of, yep, Ryan was out and there's his sick day, and we'll be able to process payroll. And so it's not meant as a clock in, clock out in that type of system. For our hourly employees who do currently record their hours, we are moving that all into ADP so it doesn't happen on Google Sheets that then may get transposed wrong. And so that's where they have the ability to clock in the 3 different ways so that they don't have to remember at the end of the week to fill out their timesheet, which is oftentimes actually the challenge. I did exactly this myself in Philadelphia, just every day. They just remember to clock in, clock out. And again, if they forget, our staff is there to support, not to do as a consequence. It's really designed to make this as simple and as easy and something where you like set it and forget it, and just be able to do that. Board Member Bilyeu, I don't know if that answered your question.
I mean, thank you for the context and I appreciate that. I'm hoping that that's the case, that we won't need technical support. And when I mean technical support, it's not necessarily the usage of, I'm just literally talking about the functionality of the apps. Like if the app doesn't function, it's not about the internet and it's not about you using the app. It's about the technology of the app. I mean, our payroll goes off like a lot of times for 3-4 days and they have to, go get some technical, I don't know what the process is, but that's more of what I'm trying to get at, is if we have resources to utilize them, if that happens, like if the whole thing just goes down. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, just on that piece. So one, I do feel comfortable that the risk on this is low. I will also just add that, well, our contracted individuals that are helping with this transition will be leaving us as we make the transition. We will continue to receive ongoing support from ADP. And if it's helpful outside of this, we're happy to share the exact contract so you can see what the ongoing support is. But ADP is a national organization. I feel like it was vetted and will be able to handle the 1,600 employees of PPS.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, Aline, are you ready for your next part? Okay, beautiful. So we'll plan on probably doing the budget review and then taking a quick recess.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. So let's dive into the FY24 budget review. So the big picture here is we're looking at our revenues overall, and we're looking through September 30th. And as you can see, we're about at 23% collection rate, which is great. We're like on target. What I did on top is I provided you what the revenue collection was for our general fund or our operating account. And then the other funds are what we call our special revenues, which is all of the grants and special purpose funding that we receive within the district. So I kind of broke it out. I try to make it as simple as I could. So that way you could see that I try to condense some of the language together so that I could put like type of grants and categorize them together. In regards to the expenses on the general fund, we're in a good spot. We're, as you can see on the right side, budget to actual, we're 20% on usage. And then what I also provided you was FY 23, 22, and 21's actual expenditures for this same moment in time. So you could see that we are in alignment to our previous years. The only exception for where we are as far as expenses is on other costs, which is line 4. Going across, you'll see that we have a 60% usage. And that is due merely for the fact that we went ahead and purchased the 6 buses that we budgeted for in August, rather than seeing that expense go across 12 months of financials. So that's why you see that at 60% in 3 months into the fiscal year. So this is now, the next 2 pages is just an overview of where we are with our financials for the special revenues. Again, I put together the like types of expenses as far as adult ed, your CTE or your career technical education. And I basically try to condense it so it's a little bit easier on the eyes. You will also see under FY24 budget, there are some areas where you will not see a budget for that. And I'm currently working with staff to make sure that we can get all of our budgets in for all of our special revenues. A lot of times what happens is we have a timing issue and they don't put the budget information into the system until it's actually approved by the state. So this is what we gathered and put together. But as you can see at the end of the next slide, Aaron, you'll see that overall on our expenses, if you go all the way to the bottom, our expenses are in line with 3 months into the fiscal year. So there is no concern for where we are financially. Do you want me to keep going? This is now the budget process.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I think we can finish all of you before we take a recess.
Yeah, this one's pretty quick. So we have submitted and spoke with the city on a draft timeline for our budget and for our budget calendar. As you will see, we made sure we put room in there for times where the board will be able to provide input, the community will be able to provide input, as well as the staff. We did work with the city on this, and they gave us a couple of days that might have to change. So this is not 100% foolproof yet, because they're in the process of transitioning based on their change in council members. So they're most likely going to end up with new committee members when it comes to their budget side. So we were told that if anything, some of the times will be slightly off. But so for right now, though, we do have our draft calendar ready to go for our FY25 budget. We're very excited to get into that. So I will leave it there to see if there's any more questions.
Were we able to put the budget overview or the calendar in board docs for tonight?
I did not. I put it on the finance committee agenda, but we could put it in tonight.
I'll add it in so everybody has record and the public has record too.
Board Member Victor.
If I could just make one comment just based on this, this screen, this slide, just to note that the community will also have opportunities during our public hearings and before any votes. So there'll be more opportunities for community involvement than we have indicated here. These are additional opportunities.
Anything else from board members? Oh, thank you, Vice Chair Bondo. I appreciate the high hand.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for well done. It's just really concise and well presented. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so then I'm going to move us into a quick recess before we look at student climate data, because I think that's also going to be pretty big. So let's be back in our seats by 7:40, please. Thank you. All right, so we're back, and now we're going to move into school climate data. Deputy Superintendent, it's all you.
Great. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having us here for this presentation tonight. So tonight's presentation is intended to provide a high-level district-wide overview of our data related to school climate from last school year. So I want to give appreciation to our Director of Data and Analytics, Matthew Powers, and our Data and Reporting Manager, Zach Beaulieu, for their work to get us to this place. They are deep in the work of rebuilding up our data systems and are ongoing. Matt will be with us us next week in our board meeting to talk about the progress around the development of our data systems ongoing. So appreciation just to them. So they've rebuilt a number of our processes to enable the production of this report, and we will continue to add reporting functions at the school and subgroup levels and can provide further data as that gets established. For tonight's presentation, I'll share the district-wide outcomes related to daily attendance, chronic absence, suspension, and harassment and discrimination data. So our first data set that we'll review is related to daily attendance. In this first graph, what you can see is our average daily attendance over time, going back to the school year 17-18. And so, what you can see here is that in school year 22-23, we saw increases at our elementary and middle school grade spans in terms of average daily attendance, but a continued decline in our high school average daily attendance. In this second graph, this is a picture of within last school year, so over school year 22-23, by the different grade spans in terms of by month, how data was tracking. So obviously, one of the things that jumps out is the big December dip. So that correlated, if folks will recall, with when we were most impacted by flu last year. And there we had a number of schools at which we were kind of back into COVID times where it was unclear if we had enough staff to remain open. So that big V in the month of December tracks with kind of our experience in the year last year. So, also you can see particularly at the middle school and high school grade spans, that the attendance lagged over the latter part of the year in the last few months. So that's data that'll help inform some of the timing of our interventions in this coming year to try and sustain attendance as we close the year. The next few slides will look at some pictures around how last year's attendance data looked for various subgroups. So in this slide, we are comparing attendance rates by our largest racial subgroups, and you can see that attendance by students who are Hispanic is where we have our greatest challenge, something that we've talked about before. So we believe this is most extreme at the upper grades in high school based on our past data. When we break that out by students who are English language learners, we do see a slightly lower attendance rate than the overall district average for those students. And then finally, when we look, not finally, sorry, there's another, look at our attendance for students with IEPs. Again, we see a slightly lower attendance rate for those students compared to our overall district student population. And then the last slide is in terms of slices of the economically disadvantaged. So students who qualify as economically disadvantaged also had a slightly lower average daily attendance rate. So ultimately, in terms of daily attendance, we are seeing progress overall at the elementary and middle school levels in terms of, our attendance rates rebounding. But our high schools overall in specific subgroups, especially our high school students who are Latinx, continue to be areas of concern. The next data set we'll move through is our chronic absenteeism data. So this data tracks to some degree as our daily attendance data, as you assume it would. In this first slide, what we're looking at is our overall district chronic absenteeism rate as compared to the statewide data. So the statewide data has yet to be published for last school year, but we'll update that. But what you can see here is, as known, that our chronic absence rates have increased, since the pandemic, as it has regionally in state and national levels, though we are performing, slightly better than the statewide average, which, is, a small measure of consolation, given our student demographics and how that compares to the state. When we break that out by grade span, consistent with what we saw in the average daily attendance, we began to see improvements at our middle school and elementary levels last year, obviously most distinct at the middle school level, but the continued increase at the high school and flagging just, again, that continued area of concern at the high schools. As we then think about the data by different racial subgroups, here you can see that we're seeing a slight decline for students who are Black, but continued increases in our white and Hispanic populations, with significant concerns about the overall chronic absence rate of our Hispanic students. When we break that out into some of the different programmatic areas for students who are English language learners, we see students who are ELs with our highest rates of chronic absence as compared to the overall student population and those who have exited English learner status. Similarly, with students with IEPs, consistent with the average daily attendance, you see increased chronic absence rates for students with IEPs. And lastly, for economically disadvantaged students who qualify for as economically disadvantaged, we see a slight increase over the overall student population. So thus, not surprisingly, we're seeing consistent patterns in areas of both improvement and continued challenge in both our daily attendance and chronic absence data. The next data set we'll walk through in terms of the high-level district-wide data is our student suspension. So as a reminder, suspension is defined as when a student misses more than half of their regular instructional day. So whether that's for an in-school or out-of-school suspension. So the first slide looks at our suspension data over time, and what you can see here are that we had a decrease in our overall suspension rate last year. Additionally, for incidents that have required a suspension, the bottom charts show an increased use of in-school suspensions and a decreased use of out-of-school suspensions over time, in line with some of our work in the Alternatives to Suspension work group. When we start to break out the data by our racial subgroups, we are seeing a slight decline in the disproportionality of our suspension data. Here you see that white students have an increase in their suspension rate, and as a group that represents a smaller proportion and a decreasing portion of our overall student population, that reflects the beginnings of a decline in the disproportionality of our discipline data. So it is initial progress, and still further work to go in that area. When we start to look at it by subgroup, we still see some of the kind of challenges that we saw in the attendance data. So our English language learners, students who qualify as English language learners with an increased rate of suspension, and most challengingly, a significantly elevated rate of suspension for students who have IEPs or students who receive special education services. When we look at the reasons for suspension, this had been an area of focus in terms of data quality over this past year. So feel, much better about this data at this point in time than last year when we presented. We see that the majority of reasons that students are suspended have to do with violence, either with or without physical injury, primarily without, but those incidences account for, more than half of the suspensions. And then a few set of categories named as other, which, primarily include, issues related to bullying and harassment, skipping class, behavior, tobacco-related incidents or threats that didn't necessarily, result in any kind of actual physical, altercation. So this data is inclusive of both in-school and out-of-school suspensions. So it's summative. It doesn't reflect a breakout by reason, by suspension type at this point. So lastly, I wanted to provide an initial overview of our bullying and harassment and discrimination data. The first slide reflects the data that was logged in terms of incidents of harassment or discrimination within, Infinite Campus as part of our regular monitoring. And so what we see here, we do see an overall increased rate of incidents reported of harassment and discrimination. So while this is obviously troubling, it also reflects our ongoing push to increase the number of reports from students to more accurately reflect the anecdotal experiences that they've shared with us about their experiences. So we feel like we're in some respects making progress and capturing a more accurate picture of what's happening to more effectively provide supports and interventions. Also note, within that context specifically, the increased of rates of reporting of incidents of discrimination or harassment based on a racial protected class. The next few pieces of data are related to our work with our anonymous reporting system. So the first is, kind of what was reported through the anonymous reporting system last year. So here we had 63 reports submitted over the course of the year through the system across a wide range of behaviors, that were indicated. So all of this is kind of self-reported data in terms of what the individuals may have put in the anonymous reporting form. And with the behaviors primarily being ones that they're reporting of on-campus behaviors, though not exclusively. Then in terms of who was reporting, this data comes again from individual self-reporting in the form. So it's kind of pulled from that. And so you can see that more than half of the reporters were individuals or people of color, and that they represented a diverse set of identities in terms of gender and sexual orientation. The largest number of reports comes from our middle schools, in particular Moore and King. And while reflective of ongoing kind of culture challenges for sure, it's also attributable in part to the ways that we worked last year with the harassment and discrimination liaisons at those schools. We had a new one at the Moore campus last year who we were engaged with on a pretty regular basis. Lastly, the last bit of data is related to the work led by our student equity officer, Tyler Schwaller. So this is a report of last year of the number of kind of complaints and investigations that he responded to over the course of the year, and partnered in many cases, virtually all cases, with building leaders in terms of supporting either leading the investigations or providing guidance and support around these investigations to our building leaders. So overall, we addressed almost 60 cases, and these were generally split between kind of harassment, discrimination, and sexual harassment investigations and complaints that we were responding to. And so, again, as you can see, we saw, the two in terms of where we were leaning in to provide that support. You can see Deering and Moore with the highest number of cases that we are partnering with them and responding to. And then that the majority of all these cases were addressed through school-based interventions and supports. 13 of them rose to formal complaints that we responded to, and through our kind of procedures in our process. With my last slide, I guess just in terms of questions, before we open it up for questions around this data, we see certainly continued concerns in our absence data at the high school level, especially among our Latinx students. In terms of discipline, while we're seeing some progress, we remain focused on the disproportionality in instances of suspension for students who have IEPs as an area of focus moving forward. For our harassment and discrimination data, we're getting better about students reporting their true experiences. And need to continue this work while addressing key communities to support culture and climate issues, and make sure that the foundational work is happening to ensure that we're shifting the culture and what students experience day to day. So as our data team continues to reestablish our data systems and reporting, we'll be able to provide further data for you, and we'll be reporting on our progress. So next week, we'll be talking about just the progress towards the establishment of those systems as we report on kind of the work around Objective 2. And then in December, we'll be providing reports around the year to date. So this school year, around what we're seeing initially over the first few months of this school year in terms of trends around both attendance, suspension, and some of our implementation efforts to address these issues. So with that, I'll close or pause for questions around the data.
Board Member Victor.
Thank you so much, Erin. I was hoping that you could update us on where things stand with alternative to suspension work. And yeah, I'll start there.
Yeah, the group continues to meet, and there are a couple of pilots that are starting to play out this, this fall, in terms of interventions that particularly at the high school level, that they are doing for students who are referred for suspension, particularly through decreasing the use of out-of-school suspension, providing interventions within the context of in-school suspension to be able to have interventions that reduce, build skill in an effort so that behaviors do not continue. So there's use of the SEL curriculum base that is being piloted at the three high schools when students are engaged in that level, so that there's kind of proactive activity. And that was one of the recommendations that came out of the alternative suspension work group last year.
And is there a timeline for that work wrapping up, and when the alternative to suspension work group wrapping up? Because you're saying the meetings are still ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I would like an opportunity for us to tighten our policy. For instance, I don't think a student should ever be suspended for insubordination. To me, that's that's not the way that we should address insubordination.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just getting into power play, and I don't think suspension is appropriate. And I'm curious about skipping classes and how that is an intervention, that we're suspending kids for skipping classes, so they're getting even less class time.
Again, and we'll be able to kind of disaggregate this. I know from anecdotal, that the vast majority of those are in-school suspensions. There's, yes, it is counterintuitive for students to be out of school for not having been in class. And so the vast majority of those, as I am aware of kind of the instances, are actually in-school suspensions, not out-of-school suspensions. But
but kids are still missing more class time. So, I guess my question for you is, when would be an appropriate time for the board to revisit our suspension policy in order to tighten it up with the goal of further reducing both in school and out of school suspensions, but particularly out of school suspensions?
Yeah, I'll consult with, Chris Reiger and our team there, and, Ryan and so forth, to think about the kind of timeline for bringing that back and doing some updates around the overall kind of work that's coming out of the suspension work group.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Bondo?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you. It's all the time when I look at these, is all the time asking myself, what are we missing here with everything we try to put in place. So I'm going to the Hispanic and Latino students, and I know we have a low percentage of the students. And I remember a couple of years ago, I think Member Victor can remember that. Then we have created some process, to reach out to family, building some momentum to understand why we have those increase of the attendance. Are we still doing it, or we just drop out the process to involve parent engagement and value the families to understand why the student is not showing up in class?
Yeah, it remains kind of an area of focus. We are not in the same place of having, implementing fully, in terms of the engagement, and, I can report back on the status of kind of where we stand with that. At the high school level, the attendance is a kind of named focus at each of the three high schools this year because of this data. So I can follow up with kind of the status of specifically that kind of target group. And it's also as well been, an identified area as we are thinking about kind of the high school design work and thinking about what it is that's been informing that. That's one of the kind of key understandings is it's not working for, some of those segments of our population. So what that might mean for us in terms of the kinds of programming and how the current model of high school is not serving those students.
Yeah, because that one goes also the same with the suspension, right? Because even though they are low percentage, when I see 7% on the rise, it can be studied, but still a large number of those that category of student who has been suspended, right?
Yeah.
And also I'm really emphasizing what Member Victor just mentioned about skipping classes. We can have some breakdown on how we can identify that one to be out of suspension or or in a suspension from the school because, and if also, let me just get my mind right, to get if we can have some breakdown, what specific classes they are missing, if we use the same specific classes, we really can understand about the learning process on those classes. And then why students are skipping those specific classes and are we making up those classes for those students on the front end. And my third question is about the process of reporting. I just want to understand how much we doing in the building level to make sure then students are really equipped to understand how to report. Because I'm not doubting about the reporting on some of the schools, but I'm just a little more frustrated to know that it's too low by knowing that we may have more cases. So I just want to understand how much we're doing it, because it's a lot of students, they just don't know. Then they have that reporting process. And I want to see how can we do better.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, we continue to meet with the liaisons to try and bring visibility. One of the goals this year is to be able to have, that Tyler is leading with the liaisons, is having the kind of like hard copy things available, posters, things like that help to as well make students and bring awareness to the reporting options. So they've been working on the development of those to be able to have kind of in the space so that people know, their rights to, not be in a space free of discrimination and harassment, and how to report, their different options for reporting when they're doing that. So that's one of the additional efforts that's kind of going on in addition to, using the liaisons and the advisory structures to communicate how they can, speak up when there are those issues happening.
I know it's too much asking, but that's something really get me for years about those reports. And I'm really a strong advocate for this. Can we have a sense of how each school is doing it? I mean, if we can have at least a map about the way they are reporting, the way they are training or do the orientation for the student to understand about those reporting, because there's a lot of on those specific on the sexual orientation, then I see a lot of ways, and also discrimination or race then is never been reported because of the lack of knowledge about students to be guided the way it's supposed to be done.
Sure. Yeah.
So
we can work on that.
Please. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Board Member Ellis.
Thank you. This question, it's kind of related to the alternative suspension, but I'm curious about whether or not restorative practices have been implemented in the past year. I know at Casco we have community council, but I'm also aware that community partners like Youth-Led Justice have services available. And are those being utilized? Because you were mentioning SEL and then in-school suspensions as an alternative to out-of-school suspensions, but are restorative practices also being used as an alternative?
Yes, is the short answer. Yeah, and have been, so a few things. I mean, one, we've been continuing to kind of build the foundation of community, part of the theory of action around transitioning to a culture that embraces restorative practices. One is that there needs to be culture and relationship, at the foundation for people to restore to. So continuing to try and work towards building circle practices has been an ongoing body of work with various successes and continued challenges. So that's an ongoing area of focus. We've had at the middle school level, building into kind of our PBIS systems, what are the expectations and how do we respond? Some initial moves around what are some of the restorative options for lower level behaviors, those, restorative chats, things like that. So we're starting to incorporate in some of those fashions to be able to mitigate, things escalating. And then at the high school level, where all three high schools have students and had staff participate in recent training around expanding kind of the engagement with students around community councils to start to identify students and build up some of that structure across the three high schools. So building on some of the work that's happened here and growing that across all three high schools. And the partnerships with Youth-Led Justice through the Opportunity Alliance. So we have them embedded in schools or using them in different ways. Right now, particularly in this moment and responding to some of the issues going on right now. But those typically come in, at the services that they often provide are at a when, more elevated issues, and kind of, when things have happened. So it's not the routine kind of behavior stuff that some of the external, partners are able to support us with, right? That's the ongoing work in buildings. But we've been able to use them in some circumstances.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Other questions, Board Member Opperman and then Bryden.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple areas. One has to do with when the student altercations occur, and they do the chat and try to develop a resolution and move on, which does work sometimes. When it doesn't work, and it repeatedly doesn't work, what's Plan B? I guess Plan B is continuing. There's, I think you are really having to diagnose what's going on, right? Mm-hmm. What are some of the supports that the student needs, right? And who's involved. So you're continuing to kind of work at that as their, referrals for social work, right? Other kind of supports that the student may need. And this is the place where disciplinary consequences, I think our suspension rate overall is relatively low in kind of like a comparison, nationally in terms of other schools and things like that. And, I don't think we'll ever get to zero because there can be a place where there is at times a role for that to be able to kind of reset and for the school community to feel safe. But that obviously needs to be last resort and all of those other interventions applied beforehand. All right. It would be good to, I think, know how and when. Every situation is unique, but there are patterns in situations, whether it's bullying or racism or ethnic situations. It would be nice. We talk about restorative justice. How is it done in different settings with different groups of kids? And that would be something we'd like to know a bit more about. So switching to high school absenteeism. And I think I may have asked this question at some point in one of our policy meetings, but the question I have is, do we analyze the reason for the absenteeism, and as some of it things that are not actually behavioral as much as needing to supply whether they just get an under the table job, or whether they're caring for siblings or other family members or transportation issues. How can we break down why there's absenteeism? I think understanding what classes they are and where they're having difficulties in, if it's a partial absentee type situation, you're going to have an issue with, because you don't speak English well, so therefore you don't understand what's going on in history or in math or whatever. That isn't, I'm not saying that is the only reason, but there's somebody in that class that sets you off and you're uncomfortable being uncomfortable or unsafe. So I think understanding those pieces of that high school absenteeism, because they aren't just all walking out of classes because they just don't like to be there. That does happen, but that isn't the norm. There's usually some underlying reason. It'd be nice to know what those reasons were, whether it's an exit poll or guidance counselor saying, what's going on. So those are the two things. I think understanding how multiple issues with people are dealt with and why are they absent? Great. Sure. Thanks.
Yeah, and I will just say that, a couple of years ago, there was a lot of work that was being done around that exact thing, to be sitting with Latino students and asking those questions to really get at the root causes. So that information is around and has been used. And I think you're right to continue that work. Mm-hmm. Board Member Bryden.
Thank you, Chair. Could we go back one slide? Thank you so much. And also thank you for your work and the team's work. So on this slide, I just want 35 complaints at Moore seems like it's an alarming outlier, just in terms of, comparison to the other middle schools. What work is being done to figure out what's going on in that building and how to make sure that everybody's having a safe, healthy experience?
Yeah. Just, and, Dr. Ahmed could speak to it as well, but just partnering with them and the building leaders and with the liaisons. Again, there are issues, right? That we need to dig into. Again, the liaison was new last year, and so interacted frequently around a number of issues that other folks were managing kind of at the school level. So I think, this doesn't break it out by kind of severity of issue. Any of them, are impacting a student's experience. So I don't want to discount it in any way, but I think the significant kind of discrepancy has some underlying with that. So it's been Tyler working with the liaison to support them. He's partnered with some of these investigations, and then supporting the functioning of that administrative team overall.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Board Member Figdor?
I am wondering, Aaron, how well do our school leaders understand the disproportionality in this data? How familiar with it are they? Because that seems like a first step to actually helping lead their buildings to reduce disproportionality.
Yeah. I would say generally, yes, they're familiar with that. And I think, continue to be challenged, as we all are, in, both having to manage the situations in the moment, right? And being aware, I think that's what's influencing some of the reductions in the use of out-of-school suspensions to be, and granted, that's not, in school, I think in-school suspension is definitely viewed as more productive. There's more opportunity to engage and support, right? So I think some of the trends we're seeing are as a result of the understanding around the disproportionality and needing to get to different outcomes. And so, the slight progress we see, I think, is really rooted in that, right? That the kind of discipline outcomes that we have are not what any of us want, and trying to figure out how we evolve and kind of transform the system and think about building the capacity of the adult behavior, right? And, they sit, our leaders sit in the middle of, very challenging tensions between, in our school communities in general. Our staff hold this of needing to respond to kind of significant needs, right? And challenging presenting behaviors, in these ways, and maintain kind of the sense of safety, order, structure, right? That's needed to kind of advance the teaching and learning work. So I think the results we see in terms of slight, kind of improvements, right, are a result of that kind of understanding and commitment to kind of addressing this work and the process that it takes to kind of build our collective capacity, right, to be oriented in a different way to these kinds of responses.
Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Russell-Wetter.
Thank you, Chair. Aaron, I just had a follow-up question to Member Bryden's question, or just, pointing out the difference with the more numbers. Do you, just kind of in the same vein of your comment earlier about, knowing that the numbers are also in context of more, education about how to use the reporting system, right? And knowing that there were issues going on prior to having, right? But what we're seeing, do you have any sense, just to try to understand, say at King and Lincoln, that, has there been different ways of rolling out, or kind of how students have been? Because it may just be that number, but I'm just curious, because I think every building has sort of, rolled things out differently, or, then you wonder about students maybe using them and then telling other students, which is great, right? But do you have any sense about that? Just.
Yeah, I think, and within this we saw,
or between the high schools too. I mean, that's
I think, over last year we're in the first year. So going back 2 years prior, there was a kind of real dedicated set of kind of resources and that the liaisons at that time had collaborated on in terms of kind of reporting. And so in the places where we saw transitions, Tyler was new last year and there were, a handful of transitions we were managing. Some of those folks didn't have some of that same support. So, I think that's some of what we're seeing in the data and, part of the kind of renewed commitment this year around how they are engaging some of the different ways to make students aware and understand what their reporting options are that, need to kind of continue to ensure there's kind of the consistency across sites in terms of understanding.
Yeah, because I think it's rare, but I can think of a couple other board members may recall, getting a couple messages from families with concerns that maybe they weren't aware of the process too, right? So sometimes students might be sharing at home and not at school, and then like, how are we, like you said, having sort of across the board education staff and the community to know. But I know, it's on that what is it called on the website, right? The kind of flag.
Report of concern.
The banner that comes across, right? So just like more visibility of it too, I know is great to, so yeah, I think just keeping an eye on those numbers too, because I think there could just be more and that is concerning, but also I wonder, just how it's becoming more familiar to school communities is also probably there's going to be some fluctuation around that. So, okay.
Yeah, it's an ongoing, we were talking about it yesterday in terms of continued both, I think at the various levels, student, staff, family, and for leaders ensuring, we're kind of disrupting. I mean, this is new capacity, right? That we have, and certainly we're a couple years into it, but it is changing a real kind of orientation towards actually looking for support, right? From the central office in this way, where that hadn't existed previously. So that's changing some kind of behaviors and expectations across the board.
And I'm sure with staff that's been in the district for many years that has done things a certain way and newer staff, like just that there's, different experience of how these kind of incidents have been managed in the past. So, okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And I just have a couple of quick bullets. But first of all, just so everybody knows, you can report a concern to the Speak Up page on the website, which is under the dropdown and the Students tab. It's no longer in the banner, but that's where you can use the Speak Up.
And there's a little button on every, on the landing page that says Report a Concern. So one of the little buttons.
Looking for the buttons. Okay. Oh, there it is with the megaphone. Okay, great. Thank you, Erin, for that. Also, just want to set a little bit of context that absenteeism across the country is really high right now. So it is a problem here in our district. That doesn't mean we stop looking at it, but just to set a context that it's happening everywhere. And as we get closer to trying to find solutions for the root causes of absenteeism, I know I've mentioned this before, but if we can continue to disaggregate by race, even across other identities. So looking at IEPs and race, looking at economically disadvantaged and race, I think that will help us get closer to solutions. And I'm hopeful that our data team is thinking about that as we're building the systems. I would love to know at some point how we're doing around Swiss entering into Swiss the data. I remember last year, Gavin telling us about, we were getting to the point where maybe we were doing things in a very codified way, but I would guess that we're probably not there yet, but I'm curious where we are in implementation, because I kind of see it as like next year will probably be like maybe our first year of like clean data across the board in terms of behaviors and absenteeism, like in terms of being able to compare. Does that feel true, or does it feel like
I think in terms of data quality as it relates to behavior like suspension and the attendance data, I think the work we have going on, the kind of routines that we've established in terms of at the school level around suspension data, right? I'm feeling, that we have made significant progress from where we were a year ago.
Awesome.
And so feel, confident in kind of the data we're sharing at this high level. Yes, the kind of systems to be able to have all the nimbleness that kind of you're referring to is what the data team's working on. So I would put Swiss in a very different bucket, right? That really is a formative tool intended for school teams to kind of monitor primarily lower level incidents so that they can kind of track and respond. It's really for the school teams to be able to know, it's like part of the culture of the practice of the school to be able to track data of what's going on in their school and, in a behavior. Are things happening at recess? What kinds of things? Are there problematic times of day, place locations in the building, things like that? And so we continue to see pretty wide use of it at the elementary level and at the middle school level, and starting to see, the high schools are using it a little bit more with some of the more major things. But I think Swiss isn't just an ongoing body of work around like all of our PBIS work. I think it's just, that's part of the practice, and the expectation is that when we assess in the TFI, so the culturally responsive tiered fidelity inventory, and we'll report out on this in December when we do that report, that's one of the components is their practices around data. That's part of what we're assessing for. So Swiss is just a tool to support that. So I think the things that we were talking about with Gavin last year around data quality particularly got to some of those reasons of suspension. There had been schools had their own reasons, right? Over time, it had gotten way wide. And so it was very difficult to bring the data together. So we went through, before Gavin and Bay transitioned last year, we went through to really narrow with school teams to get to one common set of kind of reasons. So that was just one of the data quality pieces, but we got that, and that's what's in use now. So that's what we're kind of reporting on at this point.
Thank you. Anybody else? Board Member Grant?
Thanks. A couple questions about the harassment and discrimination series of slides. I guess I have a really hard time at the macro level of this, and Member Opperman alluded to it before, that all these incidents have highly unique facts, right? So even, I'm very inclined to Member Figdor's way of thinking that insubordination is a problematic area to result in suspension. What's going on? But I also can sit here and imagine circumstances where that might be appropriate in one instance and not another. So that leads to my question: does it either happen now, or are there opportunities to have what I would call after action review of suspensions, just so someone who's not there and attached to the incident can take sort of a third party look and say, yeah, we made the right call there, or no, we didn't. Is that something that does or could happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think I wouldn't say it's something that happens consistently at this juncture. I think we're building towards having some of that capacity, with just the new structures of the, executive directors leaning in, right, in some specific instances, but even for them, the capacity for each instance, right, not to be there. I think part of what, leaders, particularly our secondary leaders, but I think there are behaviors, and again, the elementary data is virtually non-existent, which is where it should be, right? But there are, challenging, difficult behaviors that they're managing still, right, on a daily basis. So I think, we continue, that would be best practice. I think that requires a level of capacity that I'm not sure we're at, right, to be able to do that, but I could imagine, some selected
right,
kind
that's
of
what I was about to suggest,
right?
was on a selective basis, maybe just to dip in and
sure.
Spot check if you see a problem area, like in this one category, for instance. Let's take the next half a year and just take a second look at those cases, because I'd love to be, as a policy maker, I want to adjust for what's the reality on the ground, and I'd love to be able to come here and ask you or the superintendent, are we getting those calls right, or not in a penal way. I'm not looking to go after anyone making these tough decisions in the heat of the moment, but do we need to adjust something because we're getting some of these calls wrong? Right. Yeah. That's where I'd love to be able. I mean, we don't interact with the people at that level, right? So it's coming to you and what's sort of our get it right rate.
And we can, cultivate. Certainly, there some of the routines both last year and this year, with specifically with our assistant principals, had kind of focused on various cases, right, and kind of trying to align consistency of response and how people were handling things. So there'd been, I hadn't thought of them necessarily as after action reviews, but that has been kind of like a consultancy model that we've used with those groups to help to start to kind of norm that. So I think what you're inviting is in terms of kind of like synthesizing from that a little bit to help better understand when and where it has been and kind of what the needs are to be able to further kind of mitigate.
Thank you.
Board Member Youssef.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Aaron. Out of school suspension, how would you evaluate parent engagement? Are we getting the support that students need to after the altercation or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard to generalize, right? I think that's continues to be an important lever, certainly one that we lean into with our school leaders. Certainly Dr. Ahmed in his role is engaged, with building leaders and often with families in terms of responding to those kinds of instances when they're happening. So, it is, one of the most supportive things, certainly when it happens. And there are many, many cases where we are getting the kind of collaboration and communication that we'd want, to be able to support the student, because it's really challenging without that, right? I can't say that that's, in every case, and that's the work around supporting the family and, thinking about what resources they need, right? And what our relationship needs to be like with them.
Board Member, Vice Chair Bondo, and then Board Member Figdor.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Two questions here. How often are we collecting those data and statistics? Because I try to understand the cause effects between the violation time and also the responses type. So that means how often we are collecting from the building level and when the districts are receiving those data?
It's ongoing. Those are the systems we're building where it's kind of like live. The data gets entered into Infinite Campus and the reporting systems are then, that's what the data team is kind of reestablishing so that we actually have live views into the data on a daily basis.
So are you receiving, what I understood is that we are receiving those type of violation every day. So we are able to collect those data from building to building every day and coming to the district, or just staying to the building level and they try to get some responses.
I think if I'm understanding your question, yes, it essentially is every day. It's, it requires the entry of the suspension. So it's required to enter any suspension into Infinite Campus is the expectation. We've gone over that, multiple times, did that with training with new administrators. And again, that's a routine that I think we have, established over the past few years. I think prior, well before the pandemic, that wasn't a clear routine. So once it's in Infinite Campus, it's accessible to us, in any way.
Okay, thank you. And the second one is on I see we have a great 1 full year of data for the attendance. So we can understand the peaks on some of those months. To understand maybe during winter, then we saw the attendance decrease. Can we have something with the absentees? Because I just see the comparison on the year, but not on the a full year calendar. January
for chronic absence, is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yes, we are working on that. We looked at a couple of views with the data team just last week about how that would look. That'll look a little different than the average daily attendance, just because it is an ongoing kind of cumulative. Like the measure is like 10, missing 10% of the days, and so. But yes, that's part of the kind of reporting that we will have.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Board Member Figdor, and then Board Member Bilio.
I think I have more of a comment. Just having been involved in overhauling, a long process to overhaul and create our discrimination policy and procedure several years ago. Now seeing this anonymous reporting data, I see this as a good thing, that there are, 63 cases. We know we have, real issues in our schools about culture, and the fact that students are identifying instances of harm and coming forward to report them is I see as a necessary step to then changing that culture. So I don't know if I think this is a lot of cases or not, but I'm really and perhaps it sounds ironic, or misplaced, but I'm really happy to see this system being used, because we know these, instances of discrimination and harassment and bullying are happening. And so to the extent that they're getting called out, I think is really a crucial step. So I don't know if you have any comment on that or any response, but I think this is a good step.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, kind of said it somewhat, in looking at the data, it's both troubling and a sign of progress that we're getting closer, and it's hard to know kind of, I think one of the ongoing questions we'll need to ask ourselves is like, when do we think we've kind of gotten there, right? And so when should we, because it makes it hard to evaluate progress. So in these first few years, when we went from like having no data about it, really, like there were multiple years where there were literally, we were reporting no instances of bullying, in terms of like how our systems were functioning. Yet, in students, particularly when the Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey, consistently reporting in addition to the anecdotal stories. So I think one thing we'll need to continue to monitor is like, when do we feel like, okay, we've got good data and we should start to be seeing declines in this, right? Where we've reached the, I don't know what you would describe it as, but the point of like, okay, right, we are at a space where we're getting, what we would see as kind of like an accurate representation of the student experience. And we can then evaluate our efforts to mitigate for that, right? And start to see declines. Because right now we're at the space of part of our efforts are leading to increased numbers, to your point of like, that's actually a sign of progress because we're building understanding, building student sense of agency to speak up, right, about this. And that's important part of the work. So it'll be an ongoing kind of conversation.
Thank you. Board Member Billio.
Thank you, Chair Lenz. And thank you, Aaron, for this presentation. I think I echo everybody's concerns about more, as we've had multiple conversations about this.
Yep.
I'm wondering if you all have found like any way to report whether these are, or like when it's a student and a teacher, a student and a staff member versus a student and a student, because I think that could give good context on what the administration can do. What is the extent of what the administration can do versus, if it's just students having issues within themselves.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think, we could take another pass at it. That would be, because this is, as you see the form, anybody can see the form, feels like somewhat of a qualitative research topic to kind of assign the categories of, because we're not inviting students to say, well, actually we are in spaces, is this harassment, discrimination? Like there's check boxes for that. But in the descriptions, there's a space for description, and I'm just thinking of various instances where it is clear, where they're talking about this student is doing X, Y, or Z, or some of the differential treatment. Let me go back to, on this slide, the negative treatment 14, I would suspect a lot of those are in respect to an adult, right? That they were experiencing some level of negative treatment, or they're, that's what they were reporting, right? Maybe that's not totally true, but I think there could be some level of review of that data. And I think that'd be interesting. So we'll talk about that with, Tyler and Parrott.
Yeah, that would be great. And I'm wondering if there are any chances that parents are also reporting on their students' behalf. Would that show up here?
That can sometimes, and there can be staff members who are supporting students who are submitting reports, and that can, so sometimes that is clear. Obviously the times it's not clear, I'm not sure of, but I know there are definitely instances. I think more frequently, there have been times where staff have been supporting, reporting on behalf of a student or using the tool. I can think of a handful of incidents of parent reports, but only, I don't know. I mean, I'm off the top of my head, but probably less than a handful over the couple of years that we've had the tool.
Okay. And then how accessible are the definitions to report under? Not the definition. Like, how aware is the administration with the students knowing like what they can and cannot report? Because I feel like some students might not really understand it to the extent of like, oh, this is something reportable or this is something that isn't. So is that really based on them, or is there any type of like information around like, what does bullying look like? Like, this is what this looks like. This is what this looks like. So they're aware of like how to differentiate what to report.
I mean, I think to some of the comments earlier, I think there's ongoing efforts. I can think of some specific instances when things have happened where there have been advisory lessons to help build understanding, and some of the strategies to continue just growing understanding around that. Is efforts that we need to continue to make. I think also I would want. I think part of what we're trying to encourage is a culture of just reporting. I don't feel, I guess part of my response is thinking, I don't think it's important for students to try and distinguish what we want, like, oh, should I report? Should I not report? I think it's like, if somebody's asking that question, I would encourage reporting, right? And we can engage with the student and find out what supports they may need, right? And if it's, just them needing to kind of check in and talk with somebody, and that's all it's about, to help process and understand something, then that's great. That's a supportive condition we've established. And so making the fine distinctions about whether to report or not, or whether it's considered harassment or discrimination, I think I don't want to elevate those things to create barriers for reporting. But we still want to build students' understanding of what their rights are, right? And the avenues to access for that reporting. So I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Yeah, no, I mean, I echo the same concerns or the same awareness. Mm-hmm. I'm not necessarily saying that I want kids to fine, but I want them to know that anything they're thinking of is reportable, and like, instead of like, I guess like rethinking what they want to do, just always having that opportunity and knowing that anything they feel like they need to report, they can report. And then I think the other thing is like, accessibility. Like, I know a lot of ELL students that I'm pretty sure would have a hard time going through a written reporting process, which I'm assuming is where you said like they get help. But I'm wondering, how exposed is the process? Like, are there signs everywhere that are like saying, this is how you can report, this is where you can report? Or like, is there really that exposure, or is it like you have to take the time and initiative to go to a teacher or to go to somebody and then figure out what the reporting process is from there? Yeah,
that is one of the things that Tyler and the team are working on, is having that kind of level of visibility, things with like QR codes that could just take you to the reporting form, and that just being one of a few options, right, of how students can report. So, they're also encouraged to go to any trusted adults, right? Calling out and bringing visibility to who the school level liaisons are. Those are all options that students have, and there's not one that's better than another. Just to encourage the culture of reporting. So that is one of the priorities for this year, is to have that kind of like physical presence, in buildings, to build awareness around it.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that sounds really good. Thank you so much for all of this. And I'll probably be following up on some things.
Great. Yeah, you're welcome.
All right. Board Member Upperman, I think you have the last question for this. You have two. That's okay. You can have them both.
Thank you, Chair. One is more of a comment in that difficulty reporting or difficulty dealing with issues, not feeling you have someone to talk to, is it is a problem for any student. And I know that there are circle groups, and I know there are, group advisories and that sort, but it would be very interesting to have an assessment of, is every student in the building known by an adult well, that the adult then would be able to pick up the need for, hey, is everything going okay? Do something going on, that kind of thing. That's my comment and suggestion. My other question is, in the analysis of various behaviors, of violent behaviors, verbally violent behaviors, physically violent behaviors, and we've talked about student, and are the student behaviors towards teachers being recorded?
Yeah, I mean, that would be if it's the student.
No, I'm talking about we talk in incidences that may come up, and what percentage of those incidences are being actually reported to the administration, and a comparison of the two. And then it might then be compared to suspension levels, or suspensions happening more because of issues with student issues or student teacher issues. Students attack teachers from time to time, out of frustration, out of anger, or whatever. So, and also the verbal attacks. I think that I'm an old fogey, but language can be violent without saying I'm going to kill you. So. That's my. So I would like to see if we can know how that reporting is happening, if there's differentials between student-teacher reporting individually, and also in relationship to suspensions, so we can see where who's getting suspended because of who they hit. Kind of thing.
Yeah, I know. So we can talk to the team. I mean, if it is an incident that led to suspension, whether the kind of victim was a student or an adult, it would be accounted for in this data, right? What you're asking for is and there is in Infinite Campus, you can indicate, information about victim. I'm not sure how adults are identified within that,
or so if they are identified.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's it.
You're good. Okay, beautiful. Thank you so much for all of that data and all of those great responses. It's obvious you're doing a ton of work to move this forward. So thank you for that.
Yes, with lots of others.
All right. So now we're going to move to the report of the secretary. Superintendent, you ready to move out of this part? Okay. Just double checking. So we have up the consideration and action to approve the meeting minutes of October 17th, 2023. Are there any corrections from the board to the meeting minutes from October 17th, 2023? Just double check for Nyla. Okay. So seeing none, the minutes are approved as distributed in board docs. And now we're going to move on to new business. Up first, we have consideration and action to authorize the superintendent of schools on behalf of the Portland Public School Committee to request a waiver for student attendance at each of our schools on October 26th and 27th due to the unforeseen tragic events that unfolded in Lewiston and required that schools could not be open on those days. Would you like to speak to this?
Just real quick comments. So following along with our colleagues in many other districts, this would be requesting a waiver away from the 175-day requirement and have these 2 days be waived from that requirement so that we would not be making them up at the end of the school year. There's been indications from the state that would be accepted and approved. And as I said, our colleagues, as we know of in Cumberland County, have all submitted for this as well.
Thank you. So usually in new business, we're doing things for a first read, but we're actually doing a vote on this so we can go ahead and submit it. So is there a motion to authorize this waiver? Thank you, Board Member Opperman. Is there a second? Board Member Russell Better. Thank you. Is there any public comment?
Could I have a question on the motion?
Yep.
I just want to, if we could correct the motion, we are not the Portland Public Schools Committee. So it should say, the motion should just read on behalf of the Portland Public Schools.
Thank you. So we're going to consider that a friendly amendment. The motion that has been friendly amended is still on the table. Is there any other discussion? Okay, and I realize I did not intentionally close public comment, so I'm just going to go double check that we don't have an attendee with their hand up. Okay, seeing none, we're going to close public comment if there's no discussion. Deputy Superintendent, can you please call the roll?
Yep. Member Billieu,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bondo,
Yes.
Member Bryden,
Yes.
Member Figdor,
Yes.
Member Grant,
Yes.
Member Opperman,
Yes.
Member Russell Better,
Yes.
Member Youssef,
Yes.
Member Ellis,
Yes.
Member Hemond,
Yes.
and Chair Lentz.
Yes, so the motion passes unanimously with students voting with the majority. And now we're going to move on to the first read to approve the changes of policy JFABD, the education of homeless students. Deputy Superintendent Townsend, would you like to speak to this?
I think given that we have the workshop coming, I'll speak to it at that point.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Hold on one second. Beautiful. So then I'm going to go ahead and move us into consideration action to adjourn the business meeting. Is there a motion?
I have a quick question. So
Yes.
the agenda doesn't say workshop.
It does.
It does at the very end. You may have to refresh. It was not
Oh,
yet.
okay. Yep. Yep.
Yep. Motion to adjourn.
Sorry.
Thank you, Board Member Bryden. Is there a second? Thank you, Board Member Youssef. All those in favor? All right, so we're going to adjourn at 8:49.